All right, so Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim and Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, everyone. Inshallah, today we're going to be continuing with what we were talking about last time in regards to Fiqh of Marriage, and we're really, still really at the beginner's level. But we were just talking about marriage and realities, and we still didn't really start with the fiqh. So this is kind of like an intro. And we were talking about within the Muslim community, the different problems that act as obstacles to getting married. And we left out the cultural differences. And we talked about some cultural differences, but not really all details. But, it would be a really interesting study to talk about the different marriages that come from different cultural backgrounds and how successful was that, or what are the obstacles, what are the challenges, and what are the different things that did work for certain marriages, at least that come from different backgrounds. So pretty interesting to actually experiment that one and see the psychological differences in each one and what they would define, each other's roles, and how much did culture have an impact on their vision, on what they would mimic, and also on the way that they played out their role within that marriage, and how the other one was seeing it as perhaps condescending, disrespectful, and so forth, because within their culture, and by the way, sometimes they won't even know or recognize that this is based on a certain culture, and that there was a cultural grounding within this, but not necessarily something that you really meant as your intention to to speak in a different way. Because you want to keep in mind, behaviors, they are a combination of intentions, a combination of visions, a combination of a different form of communication. All right, so that's where those cultural influences would come in. Generation barriers. I think this is extremely important. Of course, this is mainly for the Muslims living in the West. So you would have generation barriers. The first generation coming from probably from back home, second generation starting to adapt and be between these two generations, and the third generation had pretty much lost their connection with the previous generation, or where they had originally come from, and then they pretty much blended entirely with the new generation. I'm actually a third generation from my mother's side. So yeah, my mom was herself, she was born in Chicago. And her mother was a Catholic nun, of course, so born also in South America. And well, she was actually native South American, but so yeah, when you're talking about generation barriers, many times the other previous generations, like the second generation and the generation before that, they may not realize all the differences, or at least all the cultures and all the visions that you had basically were definitely very influenced by the cultures and the languages and basically the different things around you. So they would want to enforce their experiences upon you, and some of your experiences are basically different, and those experiences, if you were to object to their experiences, it would come off as disrespectful, it would come off as immature, it would come off as you are setting yourself off to failure and so forth. And some of what they would say may contain some truth, by the way. It isn't until later that you would discover that a lot of the traditional ways were better and were basically coming from experience, and that is true, but not all the time. So that generation barrier can sometimes make things harder on the communication between you and your family. And sometimes, okay, what do they consider as the ideal spouse or the ideal husband and wife, and what you would consider as the ideal one, and what you're looking for versus what they are looking for based on their experience in what really would make a successful relationship. I very much recommend listening to your elders, to your parents, to your family's experiences, and not succumb to the modern stereotype that views the older generation as being backward, as being too traditional, and which pretty much gives the connotation right now that they are too traditional to mean too narrow in their perspective, to I guess too specific sometimes in certain things, and therefore they're not as mature to understand world, to understand a lot of the different things about human beings. And the society today is presenting that the newer generation is smarter, that the newer generation is coming off with a better experience, and that because they had studied things differently, they went to college and then presented that college degrees is what makes you smart. And if you don't have a college degree, like most traditional parents, they don't have a college degree, they would be presented like, oh, you're so backward, you're so ignorant, you're so uneducated, and not realize that the education that they had through their experience actually superseded by far the book smart experience and the book smart intelligence. You might have had the book smart intelligence and you thought that you just knew the key to happiness, but guess what? They had the hands-on. So just respect a lot of their wisdoms. That's my recommendation. Respect a lot of their wisdoms, and please, and pretty please with the cherry on top, show وَخْفِضْ لَهُمَا جَنَاحَ الذُّلِّ مِنَ الرَّحْمَةِ. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in regards to parents, وَخْفِضْ لَهُمَا جَنَاحَ الذُّلِّ. What does that mean? It means like it's like taking your parents with the wings of mercy in humility. This is extremely important, because to think that you are smarter, more intelligence, more experience, and all of that, that contradicts being humble to your parents, even if they may not be as perhaps educated as you, or perhaps some of them are really simple in their experience and so forth, especially mothers. That does not mean that you would become arrogant and proud beyond your parents, your mother specifically, and think that you can somehow mock her experience, look down at her and make fun or whatever, and think of it as it's funny. It's not funny. It's not funny at all. That's a form of uquq. Let's see the other one, lack of awareness. When we're talking about lack of awareness, that many times we would see within, of course, the Muslim community, there's a lot of lack of awareness in what really is considered a priority. So we're talking about lack of awareness in priorities, lack of awareness in what really to look for in a wife or a husband. In other words, to anticipate before we even get there. There's a lot of focus in social media on one, portraying marriage as being boring, as being hard, as, of course, always this type of psychology that if something is just not working out for me, then therefore I could just swipe. I could just walk away. I could just end it. And that way I could take away all the headache that it had caused me. And this is something that we could see had become a mindset of failure. So this is part of that lack of awareness in what it takes to make a successful marriage, what it takes to make a successful person, and how to view the obstacles and how to view these hardships, that they are to make you stronger and not necessarily as a trauma. And of course, there's so much to say, on that one, but I'll just, leave it at that and just count those: book smart versus social ignorance, and how to win the heart over the argument in family interference. That's more in traditional marriages than the modern marriages. Family interference also tends to be a very big, and I would say it's one of the most important factors, especially in certain marriages, especially Asian culture. I'll say it that way. It's not as much in African culture, but it's a lot more in the Asian culture. Family interference, the in-laws, they tend to feel that, this person is a new person in our family. Therefore, whether it's the father wanting to interfere and I guess impose his ideas on how and what the wife should be doing, but it's usually the mother-in-law. Sorry, ladies, but this is real. Whether it's the mother-in-law from the mother's side, or whether the woman's side, or whether it's the mother-in-law from the father's side, I guess that social centricity in many women's thoughts, that this son is mine, and then therefore this woman is taking away my son. And same thing, that this daughter is mine, and therefore this man is coming to take our daughter from us, etc. So you can see that the in-law is many times intervening in ways to either, I guess, dictate on what power looks like, what responsibilities look like, what success looks like, and sometimes trespassing their, let's say, their territory. And that brings in a lot of family problems. So we're going to talk about that in more details in the future, to really know how much of that family intervention is permitted and how much is not permitted. Financial pressure, along with, of course, the degree and dream pressures, especially during our modern times, when in order to get employment, to secure a future job, you basically would consider that degree is the path to get to getting a job. And therefore, of course, in order to get the degree, you've got college tuitions that are extremely expensive and definitely takes a lot of time. And this new graduate who probably didn't get the ability, of course, because they were younger, to work. So now they're really dependent on their family. So if they're going to be dependent on their family, or they're going to be working a part-time job, they definitely don't have enough money to sustain a future marriage, a future relationship, or even sustain perhaps their families, or even sustain themselves and cover their own expenses. So that becomes another I guess a dream that you're running after, but then you can't really sometimes recognize where and how far this is expanding. So it becomes psychological stress, it becomes financial, it becomes something that everybody is living within the society, living as this is what they should be doing. So it becomes, let's call it a common epidemic. I'll call it an epidemic, just running after degrees and feeling that you cannot make it. And of course, that becomes something that delays marriage. So we're right now speaking about 28, but guess what? Some things are actually changing. With that marriage matchmaking that I was doing, I had seen a lot of changes. People actually right now asking for a suitable spouse for their 20-year-old son or even 16 and 17-year-old daughter. That wasn't the case when I first started matchmaking, perhaps maybe 15 years ago, but now it's definitely changing. All right, so we're going to get to this idea, which is claiming that marriage is not important. And of course, marriage is a headache, barrier to success. It's disgusting. Don't want to talk about marriage with my teenage daughters. And this is a very important issue to talk about because we tend to raise children, and definitely parents have a lot of blame on this. Tend to raise children that are entitled and feeling entitled and thinking that they always have to have their parents doing their jobs for them. So if your daughter or your son, especially the daughters, let's say it that way, because the sons have a different world, but especially the daughters, if and the sons, I mean, in terms of their own spaces, if they cannot clean their own rooms, they cannot be responsible for their own responsibilities at home. Whether it recognize there's a task, this is something that I don't have to remind you to do, but you have to do it on your own. Not until they recognize the maturity to be leaders within their homes are they really ready for marriage. If you enter their room and everything is messed up, upside down, then they're not ready to be within their home and put everything in place. We're not just talking about everything in place, meaning blankets, clothes, whatever it is, and all. No, we're talking about recognizing that there is supposed to be a mindset of being responsible, a mindset of taking away and shedding off all that laziness and recognizing that it's not an issue of aesthetics, it's an issue of foundation. They'll care about putting makeup and care about appearance and appearing in a certain fashionable way in public, but you go to their rooms and their beds are all messed up, their laundry is thrown everywhere, and their rooms are, everything is just in the wrong place. And teach them. You got to teach them that it's not an issue of how you appear in public. Is this really how you are going to be at home? Is this really something that you are coming in with this hypocritical image that you are putting this makeup and appearing in a certain way, but underneath all that makeup is nothing but somebody that is not organized, somebody that can't take care of their own selves, even within their home, somebody that cannot even consider hygiene right. If your bathroom and all of that is all dirty, then you're absolutely still living at a 5 and a 3-year-old in understanding hygiene, in understanding organization, in understanding how to put in the effort, how to put in a mindset of responsibility, a mindset that is responsible, a mindset that is needing to be a leader within the home. This is extremely important because when we're speaking about marriage, it's a mindset of responsibility. It's a mindset of leadership within your home. It's creating a mindset of discipline. This is the key thing about marriage. It's a mindset of discipline. That is basically created within the person's home, within the right upbringing. So when we talk about girls and their understanding of marriage is just about all that they scroll on social media, just about romance, then therefore all they know about marriage is just one side of it. One very small side of it. Sorry, ladies, but that only takes 5 minutes. But if that 24 hours of what will really be in your marriage, you can't put that in place, then you are just having a very simplistic and a very animalistic view of marriage. It's not just reproduction. It's an issue of putting your things your responsibilities as a discipline, as a mindset, that you recognize that when you say things unorganized, oh, I can't sit down, I got to do it. Oh, I've got this to fix. I've got this to basically do as a task, etc. That's when you are mature enough to talk about marriage, and not until then. All right. Marriage, of course, is presented as never successful. And although, yes, we do see cases of divorce on the rise, but one of the main reasons why a lot of these marriages fail is because of a mindset that is failing in the very beginning of the parenting. Wrong parenting is right now bringing the implication of failed children to face and to handle any responsibilities. Whether we're speaking about responsibility in home maintenance, or whether responsibility in social maintenance as well. Focus on the social maintenance. What I mean by social maintenance, learning how to read, just read it. It's a form of farasa, learning how to read the people and their behaviors, learning how to read yourself, and learning how to read when somebody is probably not ready to talk. It's okay. Learning how to control your impulsiveness, learning how to control your anger, learning how to control your emotions, learning how to control yourself. Just to learn how to control yourself is one way of being in power to be able to control and be in leadership within marriage. I don't mean by leadership to mean the person that's giving the orders, but I mean in leadership in what positions you're supposed to be holding. You as a man, you're qawwam. You as a woman, you're supposed to be doing a different type of a leadership by not taking away that qawwama from him, but at the same time, honoring your position as well. There's no question about that, but learning how to also be in that autonomy that does not trespass somebody else's autonomy as well, which is the husband. So how do we put these pieces together? We're going to talk about that later on, inshallah, not everything today. All right. So when I would say and speak about marriage is presented as never successful, and that it just leads to divorce. Divorce is not the end thing. Okay. Divorces, if somebody is divorced, that does not mean they're a failure. It just didn't work out. And I know many people that they got divorced and started out a new relationship, a new marriage, and were very successful. Sometimes it's two not blending together, but we don't judge that these two didn't blend together just right there. And unfortunately, sorry therapists, but we have a lot of therapists that are lacking experience, and they just are book smart. They were book smart, they learned at school, etc. And then they would basically think that they can apply these I would say these formulas, and then apply it here and say, oh, this marriage is going to be a failure. There's no way that this is going to work out. This man is a narcissist, this woman is a victim, and right away that we have to just accept that she's a victim, and rather than see, okay, how can I make things work? And unfortunately, this is so common. So what we're supposed to be doing is learning how to go beyond all these influences during our modern times that are an implication of whether postmodernism, or whether it's feminism, or whether it's jahiliyyah, or whether it's lacking tazkiyah, and how to get into the process of what Islam considered as key things to help you recognize a successful marriage. So that's basically what we would also talk about little by little, inshallah. Okay, replying to some of the previous claims, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, إِنَّمَا كَانَ قَوْلُ الْمُؤْمِنِينَ إِذَا دُعُوا إِلَى اللَّهِ وَرَسُولِهِ لِيَحْكُمَ بَيْنَهُمْ أَن يَقُولُوا سَمِعْنَا وَأَطَعْنَا. That's a key thing to creating a successful marriage. Why? Because it is not befit for a believing man or a believing woman when they're invited to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to rule amongst them to say but one thing, which is sami'na wa ata'na. We hear and we obey. So at the end, the whole idea starts for a successful marriage in bringing in first submission to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, whether from the man or the woman. That's the first, and that's the main foundation. Because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala also said, وما كان لمؤمن ولا مؤمنة إذا قضى الله ورسوله أمرا أن يكون لهم الخيرة من أمرهم. It does not befit for a man or a woman if they had their own choices, or if they basically would come across Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala saying a certain decree, that they would say that they have their own opinion, which they would want to submit to, and not Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And that's a very dangerous thing, that many, of course, would give themselves the justification to leave a certain thing on Islam because they would think that, yeah, I could see la darar wa la dirar. I could see the harm, and therefore Islam is against harm, and they will make their own fatwa and then use that as their way to create a shaitani narrative to go against Islam. So of course, keep in mind, if a marriage goes the wrong way, that doesn't make marriage as the problem, but it's basically the wrong application. And certainly, Shafi'i used to say, let's see, God Almighty had permitted and loved marriage for men and women if they are in desire, because God Almighty had accepted it, encouraged it, and the Prophet, peace be upon him, had said, get married and bring children. I will be proud of you on Judgment Day over all nations, even with the lowest person. Okay, so what was a Shafi'i trying to say? That if a person basically had loved a woman, in other words, there was some kind of a love relationship, some kind of a, I guess, desire to get married to somebody, they clicked with somebody, etc., then in that situation, their recommendation would be to get. Okay, this should fix the problem, inshallah. All right, so what is that supposed to be on that scholar's note? He was basically saying that one very important thing to recognize is that it's important to get married, and in situations where fitna isn't, oh dear.
We can't see the screen.
You can't, that right, that's what I can see. I can see that you can't see the screen.
We see you're beautiful.
Yeah, Allah barik. So here we go. I'm going to do it this way. Let me see if I can give you the other screen. Yeah, that way I can make it a bigger screen. Okay, here we go. And what that Shafi'i, what he was trying to say is that if there was a love relationship, in other words, at least, let's not call it a romantic relationship, but let's just say these two were studying together at university. Somehow, you could see that there was some, I guess, some feelings, let's call it that way, okay? And they recognize it. When those feelings are there, they recognize it. But of course, the Prophet ﷺ had actually said, تناكحوا تكاثروا فإني أباهي بكم الأمم حتى بالسقط. This one's quite interesting. He said, get married and bring children, for I will be proud of my nation compared to the other nations, even if we're talking about the miscarriages. Be happy even about that. All right. And the Prophet ﷺ said, من أحب فطرتي فليستن بسنتي ومن سنة النكاح. Whoever loves basically the Prophet ﷺ and what the Prophet ﷺ had come with, he said, فَلْيَسْتَنَّ بِسُنَّتِي, then connect with my sunnah, which is the Prophet ﷺ's path, which is the Prophet ﷺ's way. And in nikah is a marriage, that is from the Prophet ﷺ's sunnah. But of course, is marriage necessary for everybody? The answer is no. Marriage actually falls with a number of different rulings. Marriage can be obligatory, marriage can be sunnah, marriage can also be sunnah mu'akkada, or it can be just a plain sunnah. I'll talk about that in just a bit. Marriage can be mubah or permissible. Marriage can be hated. Marriage can be haram. And we've got these different situations when, well, certainly marriage can be obligatory on the person. It depends on that person. So when is marriage obligatory? Marriage would be obligatory when we're speaking about the person fearing that they might fall in zina. And in that situation, it would be obligatory on them. What does it mean that a person is fearing that they will fall in zina? What that means is that, one, you can consider it as different flags. Okay, so if we're talking about a person that is probably having a strong desire, and this strong desire is pushing them to get closer and closer to probably talking to women, to probably maybe wanting to, let's just say, go to and see inappropriate things, or probably do or engage in certain behaviors as masturbation, etc., then in that situation, this person is obligated to get married. If you're starting to get that close to feeling that, okay, now you're trespassing a certain border, or you're on the borderline of getting into fitna, then you're obligated to get married. Hold on, Layla. Let me explain these ones and I'll answer your question, inshallah. Sunnah mu'akkada. Sunnah mu'akkada basically means it's a highly recommended. The Prophet ﷺ, he commanded for it, but not to the level of that command that you would consider as an obligation. So it's something that the Prophet ﷺ highly recommended, but you wouldn't be held accountable for not doing it, because being held accountable for not doing it would be if it's in the stage of obligatory. Because if it's in the stage of obligatory, then that person is going to be at sin if they don't get married. So what if it's a woman? I mean, she would like to get married, but no one is actually coming forward. Okay. What is she going to do? That, well, be available. Definitely, let the society know that you're interested in getting married. Perhaps talk to the auntie that's in the masjid, and there has to be something that, or somebody that's doing like a matchmaking program at your local masjid, and let that masjid basically, if they don't have something like that, ask for it. You can pressure the board that we would like to have a matchmaking committee, and this matchmaking committee basically, they're volunteering at the masjid and basically making sure that they're connecting between the people. So that's one thing. Number two is that you could definitely go online. And what I mean by online, I'm not talking about just talking to random people, but there's a certain etiquette. We're going to talk about it later on. There's a certain etiquette of how you can do that and what are the different things to take in consideration. So I'm just going to leave that as a blank thing, but I'm just giving you a hint. But don't go right now onlining and onlining, even though you can't make it a verb, but all right, and going on social media, it's like, okay, I'm permitted to do that. No, there are many regulations about how this is done. Okay, just to make sure that we understand it right. The other part is sunnah. Sunnah mu'akkada, it is a higher level of sunnah, because the word sunnah, just plain sunnah, the Prophet ﷺ practiced it, the Prophet ﷺ recommended it, but there were times when the Prophet ﷺ had probably seen other people not practice it, but still didn't comment or probably comment much about it because they had a different circumstance. Okay, so we're talking about sunnah, a person, they have the desire, but they but they're trying to probably put in their priorities, whether it's getting school, getting employed, or perhaps a number of different things. Yes, they would definitely love to get married, but it's not like they're in a situation where they're worried that they might fall in zina or any of that. They're doing a good job in maintaining themselves, keeping their iman. Whenever their desire goes up, they're working on their fasting to kind of do that spiritual therapy slash that therapy to control basically their eating, to make sure they're capable of controlling their desire. So in other words, they're doing their homework as recommended by the Prophet. The other thing is mubah. It's permissible. And we're looking at a situation where this person is, yeah, I mean, it would be nice to get married, but it's not something that they necessarily have a strong desire for. But it's, that person, their situation, they're basically getting into that area. It's like, yeah, I'd love to get married, but it's not something that is necessarily pressuring them, but they think that they're doing a good job in seeking ilm, and they're loving seeking ilm, and that's really what to them is their priority. We do have a number of different scholars. In fact, Abdul Fattah Abu Ghudda, he actually wrote, in fact, his granddaughter was visiting me the other day. He wrote, he's one of the key scholars, by the way. Yes, he's one of these key scholars and one of the key leaders for the Muslim Brotherhood. Anyhow, so he actually wrote a book. It's called Al-Ulama Al-Uzzab, the scholars that never got married. And some of these scholars are like Ibn Taymiyyah, never got married. Zamakhshari never got married. I believe Ibn Rajab as well. Nawawi never got married. So you got a couple scholars that never got married and felt that they would be capable of producing and contributing more within the society through ilm than through marriage.
Same like Tirmizi.
You have a very large number of scholars, by the way.
Right.
You have a very large number of scholars. Like I said, it'd be interesting to go al-ulama al-uzzab, and he talks about it. Some fell in a romantic relationship, and it didn't go out so well, and it basically just like a Zamakhshari, a very important scholar, but this one's rather funny. Let me tell you what happened. So is Zamakhshari, he basically fell in a love relationship, but we're not talking about a love relationship where this person's meeting, in private and sending love notes and messages and all of that. No, it was what we'd consider as very udri. So, just love at first glance. Of course, didn't have any relationship. He wasn't talking to her and stalking her and all of that and going here and there. But he went to her father to ask for her hand in marriage, but her father refused. And he attempted to go a second and third time and went so many times, but the father insisted that, no, you're not qualified. And one of the main reasons was basically because he was so addicted to seeking ilm. I know. It's like you would consider that an addiction. Yes. He was so addicted to seeking ilm that he didn't really get the right employment. So it's like, okay, you're so addicted to seeking ilm, good for you. But what I'm looking for is somebody that can also maintain my daughter. So the father refused. And that's when Zamakhshari, he was so angry that he was writing poetry, really mocking marriage and writing evil things and bad things about marriage. And by the way, just to tell you, Zamakhshari was a genius. He wrote the book, it's called Al-Kashaf in Tafsir. That's in 5 volumes, but I would say Al-Kashaf is probably the hardest book of tafsir out there. You would really need to be advanced in Lugha Arabiya to understand Tafsir al-Kashaf. I mean, really advanced, because he was such a genius that, he would get into, let's call it the back end of understanding tafsir and Islamic exegesis. And of course, when you're so book smart that you don't really have enough time to get a job, and you probably may have a part-time job, but that's not going to be enough to fund everything, or pretty much like a decent life. So that's why the father refused. Well, so that's when one person that, of course, الزمخشري is, a rare scholar to consider that. Unlike Ibn Hazm, Ibn Hazm fell in a different relationship, okay? Ibn Hazm fell in love with his bondswoman. She was a slave woman, but he wanted to give her dignity, freed her, and then got married to her, okay? But then that wife got sick and died. She was originally Hispanic, so we're talking about Latina, okay? Well, Latina, yeah, if you're talking about Latin America, but if you're talking about Spanish, we're talking about, so looking very, very much like Italians and Spanish, Spain. That's basically his type of beauty. And then later, after she had died, he couldn't find another woman that he considered was his ideal level of beauty. So he would basically live just talking about his wife after he had been widowed, and would consider that that's the only ideal beauty in his poetry, and would only write about that. But then Ibn Hazm is one of those scholars that I personally cannot understand. I'll tell you why. Ibn Hazm, he was raised in palaces. What does that mean? Ibn Hazm, he was the son of one of these government figures, and he was raised in a palace, and the ones to tutor him were all women. The women slaves were pretty much the ones in the palace, and he was living in al-Andalus. So al-Andalus was considered a very upper class community, and the upper class, to be able to afford the best of the slaves were the ones that were educated and not the other ones. Why? Because in order to increase the price for that slave, you basically needed to increase, let's call it the CV. So they would educate the slaves in nahu, in poetry, in lugha arabiya, in fiqh, in tafsir, in all of these different sciences, in order for these slaves to do more than just housekeeping jobs. But they were also doing tutoring, and that was basically, bringing in a higher chance of probably being a leader. So Ibn Hazm was tutored by all these women in those palaces, okay? So later, Ibn Hazm, from his name, you can see Ibn Hazm, he got a lot of his name. Hazm means determination. He was extremely determined, and he was a person of, I would say, it was very phonetic about his views. And because he was so phonetic about his views, he would write in the most condescending, and I literally mean the most condescending way, about anybody that opposed his views. I mean the most condescending way. I mean bashing. This is real. Bashing in the most rudest way, the most ruteful. I mean, I don't know what word I could use, but when you're writing in this language that you're speaking in such bad language about Shafi'i, about Imam Malik, about Abu Hanifa, and really literally speaking in that way. But even though he was a faqih, he was a scholar of, you can consider, when you look at Al-Muhalla, his book, you could even see that he was a scholar of hadith as well. He was a scholar in each and every single field of Islamic sciences, even in Lugha Arabiya. But there was something rather interesting. Let me show you that book. He wrote a book which is called Tawq al-Hamama. Okay, so what's quite interesting. Okay, the book was translated into almost 17 different languages. It's in English, it's called The Ring of the Dove. Even though in English, it's not going to be the same as in Arabic, but let me tell you what the book is about. I read the book. The book is almost 170 pages. And the book is all about romance and love. But in his book, he was aiming at making people see the dangers of romance and how romance can affect your tazkiyah, romance can affect your deen, and all of that. But guess what? He was so successful in writing the stories about romance, but he definitely had failed in reaching his aim and his goal in what and why he wrote the book for. Because he thought that he was presenting romance as something scary, as something dangerous, as something that affects the person's deen. But in reality, he was writing about romance, and the message that I got was romance was so beautiful, was so appealing, was so attractive, was so something that really just gets you out of the world of pressure to a world of dreams. That's what that book failed. And that's Ibn Hazm. I don't understand how he can write such a book, but, you know, it really failed the target that it was written for. But that book contains stories, contains poetries. I have no idea how he memorized all this poetry, contained all these poems, and it was just telling you of how the Andalusi society was living their life like in relationship to romance, in relationship to women, men, women, the extravagant life. And I would say Tawq al-Hamama also gives me a sense of why later Andalus basically was defeated by the Spaniards and eventually the Muslims after ruling Spain for 800 years or 830 almost years, that they eventually had lost it and then they were defeated. Tawq al-Hamama says a lot about the lack of deen within that society, or else I don't understand how they got this far in terms of losing their akhlaq. Okay, in terms of makruh, by the way, for the madhahib, okay, some scholars actually consider that marriage is a sunnah. Just like when we're speaking about madhab al-Shafi'i, they considered it mubah. Okay, Malikis considered it within this area, wajib, sunnah mu'akkada, sunnah. Makruh and hated would be depending on the circumstance for that person. So if that person was fearing that they might not be capable of fulfilling the rights and responsibilities within the marriage, whether we're speaking about not fulfilling the rights for the children, or whether financially, socially, psychologically, I guess religiously, all of those different things, then in that situation, that would, then in that situation, that would be makruh if they recognized that they cannot fulfill that. Can you see the slides? Oh, now you can. If they are feeling that they won't be capable of fulfilling those responsibilities, then in that situation, it's makruh to get married. Why would it be makruh? It would be makruh because marriage is supposed to be founded on the whole, let's say, goal with creating healthy families. The second you recognize that you're not going to be capable of contributing in making a healthy family, then in that situation, we're going to say it's hated upon you to get married. Haram. This person was very sure that they're not going to be capable of fulfilling their duties in marriage. Like what? Maybe they have deen issues. Maybe they have something within their health. Maybe they have something within their mental health. Remember the DNAIM rule? And that's the same thing. When I say having something with their mental health, maybe they have, some mental health issues that's probably going to cause some trauma for the children or for the wife. And unless the wife was accepting it and it was made clear to her that this is what happens to me, I go through these episodes, and these episodes, they basically affect me this way. I need to take these medications. I do recognize that I am ill, and this is what I need to do. And this is what the people that are living with me, that they have to be prepared for. This is extremely important. But if the other person is accepting it, then in that situation, we'll say, okay, well, that takes you from the haram parameter to perhaps maybe makruh or perhaps mubah. Okay, then we're going to be basically looking at it, and then we can probably debate on really, if we had studied usul fiqh, we can probably debate on really where is this on, think of it as like a diagram or like a chart, and then we could, go up and down based on these colors depending on the person. But the other thing about haram, so we're talking about the DNAIM, so we're also talking about the I. Let's say they had sexually transmitted diseases, an STD, and then that person, they knew that if they were to get married, that other person was going to contract this disease. So what if this person told the other person that they have this disease, etc., or they probably continued to search for somebody. Let's say someone had HIV and they basically search for a Muslim woman that is pious, that also has HIV, to make sure that they're not contracting it to other people, or HPV, or, those different things. Well, HPV is a little different, but well, it's very different. Okay. But, just different STDs out there. So in that situation, it would be haram to get married. Okay. If you knew that you had a problem that can probably be contracted to someone else and affect them physically or affect them sexually or whatever it is, and that situation would be haram. Let's go for the final one, which is the mel. If the person did not have the financial qualifications to maintain the family, then in that situation, we would say, okay, injustice is haram, and it would be therefore haram for you to get married and let this woman end up needing to find a job in order to sustain herself with covering her simple expenses. So in that situation, you either find someone that understands your financial situation and is willing to compromise, is willing to live within that circumstance. So make it clear. And here's one thing. Remember that DNAIM rule? This is extremely important. The deen, the nafs, the aql, the ird, the mal, the religion, the health and or life. Number 3, mental health. Number 4, chastity and family. Number 5 is property. Remember that rule. This whole maqasid al-sharia, or the legal maxims, that's what actually explains a lot of times, that's what actually explains these obligatory, the sunnah, etc. But here's one thing. What if we had a contradicting circumstance? A person was saying, yes, it's obligatory for me to get married, but at the same time, I'm bipolar and it's haram for me to get married because I can get into these episodes where I could really lose it. And, I can get into these episodes where things would really put me in the perimeter of haram. What should I do? And in that situation, we would say, okay, if obligatory is your, let's call it religious circumstance, and haram is also your religious / mental health situation, then in that situation we'll probably take you up into perhaps makruh. And in that situation, we won't get you into considering the situation into being at sin, but you would go up into the makruh only if you had taken the necessary measurements to make sure that you will get out of haram. So if, let's say, you're talking about needing to take medications, well, then you have to take medications seriously. Or perhaps maybe get hospitalized for some time, well, then get hospitalized for some time, if that's how that treatment is basically going to be putting things in place. If, let's say that, no, it's haram because I don't have the money, well, then probably get a job, or probably maybe figure out a financial plan on how to work it out with your spouse to make sure that you don't end up probably living in injustice if it's a financial plan, or finding and not deceiving or manipulating people to make them think that you can afford it. So we'll have to lay out a plan, whether it's lay out a plan, financial plan, or whether it's lay out a mental health plan, or probably a social plan. I don't have my own separate home, but I'm living with my family. Yeah, well, what does that mean? That means, yeah, we're going to be having a shared bathroom with everyone else. And that means we just have one really small room, but noises can be heard outside of that small room because we just have like what is that called? Like a curtain. But that's basically what we have. Then in that situation, I would say, I'm sorry, you're not ready yet. You gotta figure out the financial situation. But what if we manage to put in perhaps the necessary precautions, maybe put a door rather than a curtain? Probably maybe see if we can, hey, you can't afford to buy a house, but can you afford to make a private bathroom perhaps? Can you afford to perhaps maybe provide at least some level of privacy for the wife? That way she won't have to wear her hijab all day. Can you provide a certain space where she would feel that this is her small territory? What does that look like? So there are certain things that we would have to consider it as a precaution to keep away from fitna, because it makes no sense that you're keeping yourself away from fitna but putting somebody else in fitna. All right. And don't underestimate the impact of in-laws and the impact of having those borders confused. And then we end up getting into these marital problems. We're going to talk about the in-laws, and a lot to say about in-laws. So if we're talking about contradicting circumstances, or at least a person's obligatory on him, but then it's haram at the same time, then we're going to put in the different regulations in order to get it out of haram, and then put it at least within the makruh or mubah. All right. All right. Layla Ali, you had a question, dear. Go ahead.
My question is, those who say like marriage is like a risk and you should just wait, and how do you like, and you're saying, and some people are saying that marriage is obligatory.
So what is the question? So some people are saying marriage is a risk and marriage is obligatory. Is that what you're saying? What are you saying exactly? Layla Ali, go ahead, dear. Did you get muted or something? Yeah, I'm trying to understand your question. All right, we'll get to, oh, that's okay. That's okay. You can write it down in the chat. And yeah, let me see what you're writing in the chat. The kids are in the room. I know, I hear you. So let me try to understand it. Like you said, that sometimes we've got a situation where it's both. A person is risking one side at the expense of another. So in that situation, we'll have to work out a plan for this person to make sure that we take out the risk, and at the same time we put kind of an agreement between the husband and the wife that he discloses those issues that can be a dangerous thing. So let's say we're talking about mental health issues, that the wife understands that we're talking about let's say disclosing the information that relates to the wife, and letting her feel whether she's consenting to it or whether rejecting, and recognize the implications. Are you ready for such an implication? This person is probably maybe disabled. What kind of disability? What does that look like? Don't live in a utopian mindset and thinking like, it's okay, I understand it. No, you really have to understand the implication before you jump into a utopian mindset and think that you're just going to base your decision making based on some form of a momentarily and a very temporarily emotion, that you're pitying this, having pity for that person. Don't pity that person. Are you ready for the implications? Are you ready for this circumstance? What does that mean, etc.? So this is extremely important to keep in mind. One, disclosing these factors and these issues that may act as an obstacle. Number one. Number two is reading about these obstacles and what and how they will affect certain things that are basically going to be expected from the other spouse and what that looks like. And number three is setting out a plan when things go wrong. What help can we get? Where can we get help from? Who is out there when you recognize? Let's just give an example. Let's say a person has a disability. Okay, they get seizures. Okay, this person has seizure episodes, which sometimes, let's say, is affecting their ability to get a job, to basically maintain their life, and etc. And they end up getting hospitalized every once in a while. If he end up in needing this hospitalization, that's going to affect employment. But let's say you too are acting like the PCA or the personal caregiver and care assistant for this person, and you too now cannot get a job. Is the family going to be assisting? Is the family willing to step up? And if the family is not willing to step up, can we get government assistance? Go and ask, are we qualified to get government assistance when the family is not capable of giving you this assistance? What is the plan B? But to get in trouble and then start thinking about what assistance and what other plan Bs are probably going to be available when it's too late sometimes, or putting you on the spot, is definitely not fair. Think of plan B before things go out the window. And this must be clear to the spouse. And certainly the spouse should also work to help the other person help them. Okay, let's continue right there. And I could see you wrote something in the chat. Let's see. So you are writing, hold on, let me see. Islam says marriage is rizq and we should wait. Should we wait, or no, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, فَامْشُوا فِي مَنَاكِبِهَا وَكُلُوا مِنْ رِزْقِهِ. Don't wait. Search for the rizq. Why wait? Search for the rizq. Go and do your homework. Just like you do your homework for getting your rizq in money and getting a job and seeking a job. No, search for your rizq. Why not? Search for your rizq. Be out there and let, just like you would go out there and get a job and probably, apply for different jobs, even though just like that money rizq, how is marriage being a rizq different? Marriage is a rizq and it's a provision. The same thing. It's okay. We'll talk about, ladies, and just different ways of how you can apply and where and how you can be out there and how you can search for your rizq as well. We'll talk about that some other time, inshallah. So I hope I answered that one. But no, it does not contradict, seeking marriage and at the same time believing that it's rizq. You don't have to wait till the charming prince comes over and says, okay, do these shoes fit you? It doesn't happen that way. Doesn't have to be like that either. All right. Okay. Levels of recommendation on marriage. Number one is that scholars have different opinions on the whole idea of marriage and where it falls within those levels, makruh, wajib, etc., that we just talked about earlier. And when we're talking about obligatory, we said that just basically means that if the person does not get married, that they would be committing a sin in the circumstances where they're capable of getting married. There is rather another thing that I had not mentioned, which is fard kifaya. Okay, what is fard kifaya? Fard kifaya simply means that something is obligatory on the community. So it's a communal obligation. Fard ayn is that it's an individual obligation. So fard kifaya, communal obligation, if we basically somehow, just like in Japan, okay? In Japan, for example, marriage is not considered as something that is important. Degree, getting a job is what to them is considered a priority. And marriage is set on aside. And of course, at the end, they do have the zina and all of that out there, but marriage is the last thing that they would think about. But in a Muslim community, that would be dangerous to have, not necessarily just the zina places, but the whole idea of delaying marriage and considering it as, well, this is a secondary thing. Let's just say we had a Muslim country that basically was pushing towards the lifestyle that you would see in Japan. That marriage is not necessary. As long as you get a good job, you get good income, that's all that matters. Okay. Are we seeing, or is this permissible? The answer is no. Because within a Muslim community, it's fard kifaya. We have to have a number of different, or let's say enough statistics of people that are getting married and getting children and bringing basically bring a society, a generation that's basically taking over that role in the future. Why? Well, that's because the population itself will act as a defense for the Muslim identity. It acts as a defense. Just think of it this way. Act as a defense. And if we would consider that, yeah, we have to encourage reducing the number of kids and contraceptives and all of that, then that's actually against Islam, because what Islam encouraged is basically to get children and to increase the number of children and not decrease the number of children. Okay. But we're going to talk about contraceptives later on. Okay. But of course, we're talking about a society that's probably, let's say, but we get this kind of society. Then in that situation, al-amr bil-ma'ruf wa nahy anil munkar would be in encouraging the society to embrace sunnah and not embrace dunya and all these different ideas that are spreading within the society, telling them, oh, delay marriage. As long as you're successful in life, you got a degree, it's all that matters, and have a home and just live on your own. Marriage just comes with a whole package of headaches and responsibilities and all of that. Then this would be fitna. This would be spreading fitna, and this would be against Islam. This would be spreading fitna and is against Islam. So therefore, our duty is to do amr bil ma'ruf wa nahy an munkar. How do we do that? Amr bil ma'ruf wa nahy an munkar in this situation is encouraging the people to see that marriage is a sunnah, that marriage is something that brings stability within the person, within the individual, psychological stability. We just have to learn how to do those techniques and learning about one another and learning how to make marriage be the place of second, be the place of mercy, be the place of happiness. And rather than having those other visions circulate and basically become prevalent within the society. So we have to recognize the dangers of different ideas, and we have to come in as Muslims and do amr ma'ruf and nahy an munkar and encourage the opposite of what a lot of these liberals, a lot of these almaniyin, those secularists, and basically would be spreading within the society. Okay, permissible when the person has the desires and obligatory when fearing zina. That's the general premise. The general premise is that it would be permissible when you've got desires, but obligatory when your desires go strong and you fear zina. Makruh is when we're talking about the Shafi'i madhab, they consider it makruh. That's a pretty ironic one, but a lot of the Shafi'is, they opposed that and said, no, that's actually a false claim on madhab Shafi'i. That's why when you look at a lot of the Shafi'i scholars, many Shafi'i scholars did not get married. That doesn't mean all, because you have a lot of Shafi'i scholars that didn't just get married, but they got a lot of kids. And I mean a lot of kids. Just like you talk about in Nasa'i, Imam in Nasa'i or in Nisa'i, okay? But in Nasa'i is actually more accurate because he's from the city of Nasa, okay? You actually have a number of different scholars that were polygamous as well. Just keep that one in mind, okay? And when I say polygamous, I mean polygamous, okay? And also had a lot of children. So just keep that one in mind if we're talking about Shafi'i as well. So yes, we had scholars that got married, scholars that never got married, scholars that had their preference in what a marriage, an ideal marriage looks like. And at the end of the day, remember, that's within the parameter of how we understand human behavior. Sometimes how we understand what would be right for this person, but wrong for that person. And we can agree and we can disagree, okay? It depends on the angle that you would view this in. And certainly people are a lot more complex than anything else in this world. I mean, when you study physics, you'll know that this melts at this temperature, at this degree, and it basically would I guess freeze, or what it looks like, or this thing, but at this temperature. It's so easy to study when you're studying physics and chemistry and solids and all of these different, or velocity and all those different things about physics or chemistry and biology. But human beings are a lot more complex than that, because there's free will. That free will, and because we are not predestined and we are having this free will, sometimes it's pretty hard to understand how these factors play in that person, and what will this person do, what choices will they make, and the list goes on and on. How do we understand how this is going to be played out in person A might actually be completely different than the way it would be played out in person B and C and so forth. Even though the same factors could be there, but free will and a person's own choice in how they would understand it is going to be a completely different dynamic than the other person. When is marriage haram or makruh? So marriage would be makruh in the situation if she is incapable of fulfilling the marriage duties, that whether he or she, and or the financial capabilities for the wife. Remember the DNAIM, or psychological capabilities, not able to be just with the husband and wife. Then in that situation, we would say, well, you know, it's best that you would consider justice as your goal, because that's our key goal. Justice is our key goal. But if you're not capable of getting to that key goal, which is justice, then in that situation, we would tell you to add on to your bucket of duties, and you're already failing in the bucket of duties when you just have, let's say, 4 or 5 duties, and to come in and add that other bucket, then in that situation, you're definitely going to be tilting. If you're going to be tilting, then you're going to fall within makruh. If you're going to be tilting all the way over, then you're definitely falling on haram. So, of course, by the way, it's important to mention some scholars hated it for hostages in a place other than a Muslim place, in fear of the children growing up in the non-Muslim areas. I wanted to mention this one. It's quite interesting, by the way. If we're talking about a hostage, this hostage was taken as a captive in, you know, at the time, they used to have something called Dar al-Harb and Dar al-Islam, which means the house of Islam and the house of war, which was based on the way that political divisions were basically laid out in how they played out basically on earth. So you would have the Muslim empire or the Muslim khilafah or the Muslim governance basically within a certain geographical area. Okay. And let's say Persian, or let's say Roman, Roman means Western. Okay. It was within a certain geographical area. Let's say let's say Abdullah was taken as a hostage from the Muslim country, from a Muslim battle, whatever it is, a battle that was against the Muslims. He was taken as a hostage. Couldn't go back home, but he had a strong desire. Okay. So in that situation, let's just assume that he was capable of finding another female hostage, okay, a woman, and then let's just assume, or at least a Christian woman, and got married to this Christian woman and just wanted to get kids. Some scholars actually hated, if this person is a hostage and is not capable of living amongst the Muslims, some scholars actually hated that they would get children or even get married. But at the time, there were no contraceptives. The only contraceptive was, you know, abstaining from marriage, because they didn't have any other contraceptives. They did have some herbs that they had said that it delays pregnancy and all of that, but they're definitely not as effective as what we would talk about today in terms of perhaps the medications, the contraceptive pills, and so forth. So I'm just letting you know about this one, because the inference that we would be getting is, what if I'm a Muslim, married and living in a non-Muslim country? In the inference that we would say, you definitely have to do your homework in ensuring that your children have a Muslim environment to grow up in. That's number one. The other inference is, in order to control the circumstance, probably be able to afford an Islamic school, probably be able to afford a home that's away from the low class / gain area, drug area, addiction area, all of that stuff. So you're looking for an area that's better security, better deen, and certainly less of those contaminations within the society. Then you would have to consider that. And number 3 is that you would also take in consideration that don't take the hadith out of context when the Prophet ﷺ said, bring children, and say, yeah, I want to bring children. I want to bring 5, 6, 9 children, etc. We'll say, wait a minute. In Nawawi explained a very important explanation here. And he said that this hadith is involving a circumstance that we're trying to produce children that are of high quality and not quantity. We're producing children of high quality and not quantity. Because the Prophet ﷺ certainly is not going to be proud of those that are going to be hellfire. He was wanting to be proud of people that will be from his nation going to Jannah. And this is extremely important. And we cannot just turn a blind eye on the different factors that will affect the Muslim family. So when you look at this one, some scholars hated it for hostages in a place other than Muslim place in fear of their children, etc. That's why some scholars actually said it is impermissible to live amongst al-kuffar. That's a whole different conversation. Preponderant ruling on marriage in general. 1, it is recommended, there's no doubt about that, for the Quran and the Sunnah indicated in general that marriage is something that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had created and is part of the signs of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Okay? Celibacy is hated, which is tabattul. And certainly it does not increase the person's faith or iman. And the Prophet ﷺ had actually mentioned, La rahbaniyata fil Islam. There's no celibacy in Islam. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had even talked about the people of Ahl al-Kitab. He said, وَرَهْبَانِيَّةً ابْتَدَعُوهَا مَا كَتَبْنَاهَا عَلَيْهِمْ. Rahbaniyya, celibacy. They invented that. They basically had ibtada'uha. They had innovated that. ما كتبناها عليهم. We had not obligated them to do it. ما كتبناها عليهم إلا ابتغاء مرضات الله. Is this exception? There's a whole debate between scholars on how do we understand إلا ابتغاء مرضات الله. Does that mean it's permissible? If only they were basically abiding by it? Or does that mean that celibacy, even in the previous nations, that it was not something that was permissible in Islam? Okay, or even in the previous nations. We're talking about Islam to mean, the religion of all prophets. Okay, let's see. In conclusion, marriage depends on each individual's physical, psychological, and certainly financial circumstances and their capabilities of fulfilling these needs. What needs are we talking about? We're talking about the D-N-A-I-M, fulfilling the deen, fulfilling the nafs, fulfilling the aql. You know what? Let me take that out, right? I'm going to get you to that one because this is the core, okay? Let me see right there. Where is it? I'm going to find it right there. See if I can find it right there. No, I'm going to find it, inshallah, because this is a key thing. Okay, I'm going to put it out right there. Pay attention to this one because this is actually key. How do we understand marriage? How do we understand the priorities of marriage? And it basically falls within the rule of D-N-A-I-M. Remember that one. Because if we don't actually understand the D-N-A-I-M, then we're really confusing our vision and how we put things in place, right? Let me see if okay, here we go. This is I'm gonna give it to you. I'm actually searching for it really quick. Okay, and where is it? There we go. I found it. It's a completely different slide. Okay, but definitely, when you can't see something and you suspect that I'm looking at something, please tell me. Here it is. Okay, remember, these are the principles of Sharia. Apply this in each and every single corner in your life. Memorize this the way you would memorize your name, the way you would memorize your social security number, the way you would, I don't know if everybody memorizes their social security number, but anyhow, memorize this like ABC. Okay, you have to. Every single day, apply this rule in your life. Your deen comes first, your life comes second, your mind health and your mental health, or your mind health, mental health comes third, your chastity and family come fourth, your wealth and property come fifth. Okay, just keep that one. So what does that look like? That looks like, that's the principle, those are the principles of Sharia. And to understand the principles of Sharia, it basically considered that, well, the first thing that you want to see is that, how does this affect me on my deen? So if we're talking about marriage, okay, let's say you want to get married. Well, the first thing I want you to look for is this person's deen. The second thing I want you to look for is this person's physical health. Yes, look for that. See, are there any STDs? Are there any matters and health issues that I should be concerned about? Things like diabetes, cholesterol, heart problems, kidney problems, all these different things. These are really important because guess what? They will play a role in your marriage. Obesity, all these different things, diabetes, I don't know if I said it or not, all these different things, they will play a major role in how you're going to be capable of fulfilling the marriage needs. If this person is diabetic, for example, high chance of having erectile dysfunction, high chance of for example, complications in pregnancy. If this person is obese, high chance of probably not being capable of maybe maintaining their health for a long time, high chance of probably developing stroke and heart diseases, and the list goes on and on. How does that affect your marriage? And certainly maybe even their psychology. And guess what? When we're talking about obesity, you're talking about even brain shrinking. You know why? Because not only is the fat being accumulated on your body, on your skin is probably is elastic to expand, but if it's accumulating in your brain, it's basically affecting your brain function. That's a really scary thing. This is not me saying, this is science. Okay, so there are certain things that you have to take in consideration. Aql, if this person drinks or has some kind of addiction, then in that situation, you definitely want to consider that as the key thing to think about. If this person is taking certain medications, how does it affect them? And if we're talking about not just mental health in terms of issues that may affect their brain activity, but we're also talking about mental health in terms of, is this person having does this person have anger issues, temper issues? Is this person educated? Is this person not educated? What I mean by educated is not necessarily, the number of years that they had went to school. That doesn't necessarily resemble education. Some people, they're really good readers. They're really good on their own, may not necessarily have had that schooling education, or at least those the college degrees, but they probably had a different type of an education. Look at that. Is that something that they're capable of, having those compatibilities with you? Number 4, chastity. We're talking about chastity. We're talking about 2 things here. We're talking about sexual health, and we're also talking about family. Okay, 2 things, 2 different things. Sexual health. Is this person going through any type of an STD, any physical issues that may affect their sexual activity, whether in increase or whether in decrease in the libido? What does this look like? How is this affecting? I've had cases, even with women, actually having something they didn't know. It's called vaginismus. It's quite interesting, but married for 3 and 4 years, I have had this case where a woman married to this guy, don't need to say the country, but she basically had vaginismus in the only clinic. I asked about those clinics. The only clinic that treats this case is in New Jersey. But the husband, who was not educated about this, insisted that it was her lack of compromise. It was just her mental issues. It was, she was just being disobedient, and that she was just not being a good wife, didn't understand that she has a case. Let me give you an idea about vagitterness. Think of your eyes. This is how the doctors explained it to me. Think of your eyes. If I were to, bring my hand so close to your eye, you would blink with, involuntary blinking. It's not that you, even if I were to tell you don't blink, you would be like, you're holding yourself so, so strong, but you might, 90% of the times you will fail and actually blink. And that's the same thing, that nerves in the vaginal area, they're, anything that might get near it, it just closes, it just locks up. Okay. And in some extreme cases, one doctor explained it to me, and she told me that in some extreme cases, even under anesthesia, it will close up, even under anesthesia. And that some cases would basically be hopeless in treating it. Other cases that there is room for treatment, and and certain therapy can actually help solve the case, but they would still be in pain. Okay, so you're talking about, issues like that might actually affect sexual health. She might not know about it. She didn't know about it till she got married. She didn't think she had any issues. But then here we go. This is what arose. Same thing with men. They can have different issues as well, in different kinds of dysfunctions that can affect them. So this isn't just specific to that, but we're talking about sexual health, and do take it seriously. If there is an issue, then in that situation, I've had cases of people having so it's a neurological problem, and they would basically have some form of losing control of their bladder during sleep. And certainly they would wear diapers, etc. But in the beginning, the wife was capable of handling it. But then later on, she basically got too disgusted and decided to leave the marriage. So yes, it's fair to actually say, yes, do take the matters seriously, to make sure that you're not utopian, and that you do not overestimate your capabilities of how you are capable of handling it or not. You would have to be recognizing these issues before you jump into a wagon and feel that, uh-oh, it's tilting and now I'm drowning. Humaira, go ahead, dear.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, Sheikha. I just wanted to ask regarding the last point you mentioned. So let's assume a person doesn't know that he or she is diagnosed with a disease until he or she is married. So how can the partner be aware of that health issue in advance before marriage?
So some cases, I would really recommend doing like a physical checkup before getting married, and both of you going to the doctor and doing like a physical exam and discussing it. If you want it to be confidential and say, I'd like, your issues, like let's say before you even write the marriage contract. Okay. Before you write the marriage contract, I know in Palestine and in Jordan and in certain countries, because I'll give you an example. We have a high chance in the areas that are around the Mediterranean Sea, a high chance of developing a disease called thalassemia. Okay. And just an idea about thalassemia, it basically, it affects the person's appearance, it affects the person's, the function of certain organs in their abdomen, and it definitely, even their prognosis, there's no treatment, there's no healing for it, and then it becomes sexually transmitted as well. Okay, so yes, it does affect, it does affect the children, if a person that has thalassemia, genetically, and then he's married to a person that is a carrier, women don't usually show that. The women usually are carriers, but then they would be, if they are married to a person that is a male, also a carrier, they have 1 out of 4 cases of getting thalassemia. So a child basically having that disability. All right.
I
So
get
you're
it.
talking
Jazakallah
about,
khairan.
right. You're okay. Let me correct one thing. It's not an STD per se, but it's basically, it does, we're talking about a genetic disorder that can affect the children as well. We're talking about a genetic disorder that affects the organs, that affects and even when we're talking about their lifespan, they only live up to 40 something years old. So you're talking about children most likely living as orphans. All right. So now my recommendation, before you get married and even write your marriage contract, it's not a bad idea to do a physical checkup privately on your own. Go to your OB, go to your primary, do a physical privately. Don't tell him you're doing it. Okay. And ask him to do the same. Let him do the same, do a physical. He'll say, but I'm healthy. Please do a physical. And then once you both are ready to disclose the physical results, once you guys are ready to move into the marriage and probably, or write the marriage contract, then disclose the physical results and say, okay, well, this is what they said I have in terms of, let's say, cholesterol levels, or probably sugar level. I need to work on my weight. I need to do this. And all of that. Disclose it to one another, and that way you'll be fair to both, each other. Why am I saying first do it privately? Because I want you to know your situation first. And then before you disclose your matter and you're not really sure whether this person is going to keep your matters very confidential, you can have a very confidential issue. Like, for example, a ruptured hymen. It could have ruptured not as a result of the wrong behavior, zina, but it ruptured maybe of a severe menstrual blood flow. This can happen. This can happen. And in that culture, they may think that, oh, she was actually in a relationship that's a haram relationship, etc. So in that situation, you're like, I'm not ready to disclose this, but I need to discuss it with my father. I need to discuss it with my mother first and see what, in fiqh, what alternatives do I have to fix this? Do I have the permission to do perhaps maybe a repair, maybe a hymen repair? Is this permissible, not permissible? Then we'll discuss a different thing. Or is this person, are you ready to disclose such a matter? So I'm talking about, very sensitive issues that can rise, in that before you disclose it, I want you to discuss it with your family, because there are certain cases where the other person was not respectful of the confidentiality of that information. So before you disclose yourself and all your health issues to this person that you don't have a marriage bond yet, I want you to disclose it to your family and let them see, in fiqh, what are we looking at? What is the treatment? Is there any way to solve this medically? What does this mean, etc.? I think it's fair to actually do it that way and be wise before you disclose yourself and become an open book. And this person is going to share your information left and right. Oh, it's because he said it to his private friend. And guess what? Your private friend has a private friend too. And then your information becomes public information. Same thing with his information. So I would want you to kind of do this type of, let's call it personal evaluation first, and then see if you're ready to disclose it, and see if that other person is also ready to understand the situation and the expectations of how we need to handle this. What does this mean? Okay. The other part is in relationship to ird is family. How do we understand family? In other words, okay, I have family genetic disorders. This is what this looks like. Are you ready to understand these family and these family health problems? Are you not? It's not only health, but we're talking about, let's say, a family has, family members that are not Muslim. What does that mean? There's a certain implication. These children, they're going to see these as aunties and uncles. What does that mean? How frequent are the visitations going to be? And let's just say they're not necessarily not Muslim, but addiction issues, or probably religious, let's say, lack of integrity. How do we relate with their family? How close should we be? Talk about these issues. And if we're talking about perhaps maybe in terms of family, how close is the family going to relate with us? How close are we in place? Are we going to be living in the same neighborhood? How close is that? How close is that family going to be to us? How often? Because there are certain families, the mother-in-law literally goes into her perhaps son's or daughter-in-law's bedroom, and will literally just open up the closets and open up all these different things and question about what is this for? And it's like, I'm not sure I'm comfortable to disclose this. This is really private. There are certain sacred spaces no one is supposed to enter. That's your bedroom. Teach your children, do not enter my bedroom. Teach your in-laws, let them know that this is a private area. This is my little territory. This is no one to enter in this territory. That's it. And some in-laws don't get the picture. They just think that they could just roam around freely and not recognize that this is a sacred space. No one goes in here. Not because there's something haram hidden, a'udhu billah, but this is because it's your own autonomy. It's your own sacred space that no one needs to get involved and feel that this is public area. This is not public area. All right. The other thing about family, it's not just close in terms of, well, proximity. We're also talking about in social relations. How close, how often are we going to do these visitations? How close and how involved are they going to be in what money we make and where the money is going to be sent? Is he expected to be sending money to his family? And how much? What does that leave in terms of numbers? What does that mean in terms of their involvement on our spending compared to, in order to make room for basically the amount that his son or her or their daughter is basically sending to them? Am I having some kind of a financial obligation towards any family? This is extremely important. So we're doing the same thing. We're talking about every single time you would discuss any of these categories, you're going to say, and you're going to look at the DNAIM thing again. You're going to talk about family, you're going to talk about their deen, you're going to talk about their life, you're going to talk about their mind, you're going to talk about their chastity, and so forth. You're going to follow the same category, each and every single category / subcategory, you're going to follow the same. Mal, okay? In terms of wealth, where the income is coming from, and perhaps sometimes, can I get a bank statement and see what's your priority in terms of your income distribution? What's a priority to you? Are you considering that, for example, to spend on an extravagant and a beautiful car is more important to you than probably spending on maybe your education, or probably savings, or probably, hey, saving for the future, or probably maybe saving money to perhaps buy a home, or probably buy a business, or you just, the money comes in here, I go right there dining out. How many times are you dining out? Can you really afford to dine out? How much money are you spending in basically just whether it's food, or whether it's your deen, or whether it's in buying clothes or shoes or whatever it is, and where did you buy that from? So you're looking at, okay, if you're buying it from a store that's not necessarily, too high class, but then you're willing to spend, I don't know, $6,000 on a Gucci bag, but then you find yourself at the end of the day not capable of paying your bills. How smart is that? All right. So looking at men, where the money is coming from, how it's being spent, their vision in considering priority, and let's call it the priority in financial management. How do we see that? So all of these, they always go in the DNAIM. So when you look at, of course, marriage, and how we see marriage, and how we understand that relationship, and how we understand, of course, family support and marriage conduct and all of that, it's very important to keep these, let's call them the legal maxims, in mind. We're going to be getting that DNAIM rule very often. This DNAIM, there's the deen, the nafs, the aql, the ird, the mal. That's why I call it the DNAIM. It's the DNA, like it's that genetic foundation of what actually makes the whole thing about Islam. Okay, deen, nafs, aql, ird, mal. Okay, just remember that one. All right, so it is already 12 p.m. And I know that we still didn't go over all those slides that we were doing earlier, but alhamdulillah, we're still in the early stages of our class, so which is really good news, right? So inshallah, we're gonna be continuing next week. Well, a couple things to say is that, number one, for those that would like to get credit for the class, it'd be extremely important to register for the class, even if you cannot afford it. There's actually an option. If you cannot afford the class, there's an option. Just say you can't afford it, or if you can afford some of it, or you can say, I can afford, I don't know, $5. We'll say, you know what, just donate $5. Okay. If you cannot afford it all, you're like, I'm actually in deficit with my food expenses, let alone coming in with all this donation and all this education that I'm giving and paying for it. That's okay. You could just click 0 is all that I can afford to pay. That's absolutely fine. Don't miss out on the class. Please join the class, even if you cannot pay. Even if you don't register, join the class. We would recommend registering, just because, one, it helps to keep you in track of the class and feel that commitment. Number two, if down the road you would like to take credit for the class, we could inshallah test you on the class, and this would be something that you can take a credit just for this class, or you can take the credit for the other classes that you would finally take for all the other classes, and probably be a Gems of Light graduate. But if you just wanted just the Fiqh of Marriage certificate, that's also something that we could do. Okay. It is very helpful and very beneficial to attend the live session and not only the recorded session. The reason for that is live session studies tell you that live sessions, they have better attention, and that your chances of having that relationship with the person that is presenting the class in a live session is more than a recording. you know, subhanAllah, I don't know how, but it sends out, you know, a sense that this person is out there, that I'm basically engaging, I'm involving in this person is live right now with me, relating with me. And even the vibe of it is completely different when it's a live session compared to a recording. But if you could not make it to the live session, you know, listen to the recording. It's available on YouTube and for free. Listen to the recording and take the test whenever we would announce the test. And even if you don't hear the announcement, just say, hey, I'd like to take the test and I'd like to get a certificate for attending these classes. It will be beneficial for you, whether you're just living just for your Islam, just to learn your Islam, or whether you're basically talking to your friends and you're helping your friends in their marriage, or whether you probably wanted to be maybe a marriage counselor, or maybe involved in the masjid, or probably you've got a certificate already, a degree in marriage counseling, or probably psychology, or whatever it is, and you wanted to get involved, or probably a degree in law and you wanted to know what Islam says about this. You know, you're definitely in the right place, inshallah. And like I said, we will continue until we finish everything about fiqh of marriage. We don't stop until we finish everything, inshallah. If there are any suggestions, I'd be really happy to hear them. And I'd be really happy to even really happy to you know, listen to any criticism. I'm really open. If you say, well, you know, you're probably being too maybe explicit in some things, I'll change that. But if you feel that no, it's anyways a fiqh of marriage and these issues arise and it would be good to talk about some of the issues out there, because some of it is touching on something that I'm afraid to come forward and actually disclose about myself, that's absolutely fine, which is why I recommend, you know, talking about some cases. I'm not disclosing who these people are, but these are live cases that had come to me and basically dealt with it firsthand. And we had to, you know, learn about the solutions, ask the experts, whether in medical experts, financial experts, or probably just different experts in different fields, or even experts in marriage therapy as well. Because marriage therapists, they definitely, you know, they've got their shortcomings and areas that definitely we would disagree on, but they also have, you know, learned important keys on how to bring about reconciliation and communication in place. So let's see, Layla Ali says, so Mel, is it best to marry somebody with stable income employment than entrepreneur who isn't stable income? Oh, that's a, I mean, that's something that I'll leave you to debate with your friends and actually, you know, probably if you want to write a report on that and probably do some statistics and see, is it better? We can agree and we can disagree. So it's not an Islamic viewpoint. That's a personal perspective, which I like to respect. When something is not based on Islam and Islam doesn't have a viewpoint on it, I like to respect the other specialists that are, whether in economy, business, social relations, or whatever it is, and, you know, experts within psychology even. And I would love to hear their take and their viewpoint and the statistics that they can present in how it affected in a good or a negative way. So that's not necessarily, you know, I'd give you my personal point of view, but I'm sure you're not looking for my personal point of view. You're probably looking for, does Islam say anything about that? The answer is Islam doesn't say anything about that, and leaves it for people's experiences to dictate and to determine. And I love saying this often because I think it's important to recognize that there are certain areas that the religion itself told you to figure out and do your own ijtihad. The religion didn't necessarily dictate every single matter. It told you, you figure it out, It could suit your circumstance and not suit someone else. So that's for you to study, and that's for you to evaluate, and that's for you to share. You might have an opinion that's probably different than my experience, and you might, convince me into it, and because it's a personal opinion. It's not religion. Okay, so that's up to you. Humayd, oh, hold on. How do we sign up again? So you go to gemsoflight.org, and that's where you sign up. There is also Dr. Samia Harb, outstanding scholar. Definitely check her out. You would absolutely love her. She's, mashallah, PhD in Quran and Qira'at, in Tafsir, and mashallah, outstanding person, outstanding spirit. You will absolutely love her. There's also Dr. Muna Rifat, mashallah, head of the department, and was actually very experienced. Oh, she's still very experienced, okay, in teaching Islam. Very much, a person that has a beautiful spirit, has a beautiful charisma, has a very beautiful, and also very qualified as well. So we're really lucky to have them. So join those classes. Like I said, even if you cannot afford it, money is not an obstacle. Rizq is from Rabbil Alameen. Let's see. She said, can we put off children to achieve goals, skill, time management, social skills, and self-growth? Or is it better to put off marriage? No. Delay children and get married. You can delay children. So definitely we'll talk about that question. If you can put off children and use contraceptives till you probably get a degree, or probably, I don't know, buy a house or get health insurance or whatever it is, you could definitely do that. Absolutely, you could definitely do that. Even though some scholars actually had differences of opinions, but we're going to talk about, let's call it sexual health. We're going to talk about that from the Islamic perspective down the road, inshallah. So don't worry, inshallah, we're going to be discussing a lot of different matters. They're going to be, I would say, adult issues, but hey, isn't Fiqh of Marriage supposed to be adult issues anyway? So yeah, I'm not expecting a young child attending this class, but yes, we will be discussing all these, let's call them adult issues, in details, inshallah. But I'm just answering a really fast answer right there. And Layla Ali just posted for us the gemsoflight.org. Good job, girl. Humaida, you wanted to say something, dear. Go ahead.
Sheikha, I just wanted to ask a couple of questions I have. First, it was regarding this last point you mentioned, adult topics discussed in this course. So, as an unmarried, is it fine for me to join?
Absolutely, dear. Absolutely. These questions are going to arise down the road when you're married. Okay. To learn about this, fiqh is part of learning your Islam. All right. You don't have to be married to attend. You do not have to be. Definitely, I would want you to have reached the age of puberty. Definitely, if you see that some topics might be a fitna to you, I'll tell you, attend the other classes, but that class, when it's going to be adult issues, I will say, hey, this is adult, this is rated at this, and you will know. I will actually, when we talk about this subject, I will bring it to everyone's attention. So I'm not going to, in that way, if there are kids in the area, you could just say, okay, you need to get out. Or probably if you're not able to get them out, you can probably just listen to the recording, at your own comfort. Okay. So like I said, I will be making sure that I do recognize that there could be children in the area when I'm going to be talking about, let's say, very private matters. I will let you know. That way you can make sure that the environment is safe. Yeah.
And regarding the health issues, Sheikha, let's assume a person had a health condition, but it was cured. Should we share that
if
as
it's
well?
cured, khalas, it's history. You don't have to say it unless there are relapses that may occur again. That's a different story. If there are relapses, let's say HPV, okay? HPV, you can get it cured and then it can rise again later on once your immune system goes low, okay? This is just an example, okay? It is transmitted sexually, okay? Should you say that, hey, one time I had HPV? That's where, just keep that one in mind. Remember when we said that some issues, it's not necessarily a religious issue, but it's more, your own opinion and how we would have our debate in how ethical or unethical is this. And we can debate certain things and say, well, this is what I would, take on this and all of that. And that's the same thing. If we were to talk about certain matters like HPV, for example, okay, it can have a relapse. It can come back. Okay. But this person, you wouldn't even know they have HPV. In fact, they might get HPV and it will, just cure itself. Your body will cure itself and it's gone and you didn't even know that there was HPV. It just cured on its own. Okay. Well, good for you. Okay. But do I have to bring it up? That's when even the medical experts might actually debate on how do we consider that as, what is the ethical area? What is ethical here? To say or not to say? How much to disclose? You know what I mean? And that's the same thing if we're talking about, let's say, certain behaviors. Let's say one day this person had a deen issue. We're going to go really far. A deen issue. He was smoking. Right now he's not smoking, but at one point he was smoking privately. He had a smoking addiction privately, and now he's not smoking anymore. Should he disclose that? Some doctors will tell you, well, yeah, it would be best if you disclose it, because if you were smoking 2 packs a day, then in that situation, guess what? If it hasn't been, it depends on how long you had been smoking. And then we're going to look at how many years or how long you'd been basically repented or probably just gave up on smoking. And we're going to say, okay, here's what we need to look for. Okay. So then even when it comes to the health specialist, they'll probably debate whether it's still affecting them or whether it's not affecting them. So then we'll debate whether this is a health issue or whether this is a discipline issue or whether this is a deen issue, and whether it's going to come back as this addiction coming back. Well, what does that mean? We're not just talking about smoking. We're talking about all the different things that might fall under the same category. A person probably was smoking weed, okay, had this addiction, smoking weed, CBD, whatever it is, and they had this addiction. And then they probably stopped it for, let's say, 6 months and felt, okay, I repented, I'm done. Okay, is 6 months enough to consider that this person is cured religiously and cured mentally from this addiction or not? And then should I say it, should I not say it? Then sometimes we'll go into the debate of what actually is ethical in that regards. It's not necessarily, I'm trying to put you in the wagon since you're right now learning fiqh. I'm trying to help you become the experts in fiqh and really look at the back end. I don't want to give you the fatwa and just put it on a tray for you. I want you to see the back end and what's actually happening in the back end and how our fatwas in regard to the fiqh of marriage, how are they cooked? How is it presented? How is it cooked? What's the recipe? How did you present it to me that way? And I want you to understand the back end in order to know what you need to present in getting a fatwa in this regards. Okay. So when we discuss certain matters on how ethical and how unethical it is, not always are you going to see that we would fully agree on certain matters, and not always does the religion necessarily have a say in this or that matter. Did I answer the question, dear?
Yes, Jazakallah khairan, Sheikha.
So if there are any other questions, mashallah, we've got a really good number here. Inshallah, tomorrow we're going to be doing our tafsir. So let's hope our beautiful users and our beautiful guests right here can, I don't want to call you guests. We should call you something else. What should we call you? Give me a good name. well, a guest is somebody like an outsider. We want somebody that's family. Gemsies. Yeah, like a gems of light. So a gemsy. Yeah, there you go. Then Gen Z, right? That'll make you feel you're a Gen Z young, since we're talking about Fiqh of Marriage, and Gem Z to make you feel that you're part of Gems of Light. So here we go, young, healthy, vibrant, and at the same time, getting your ilm from Gems of Light. There you go, Gemsies. We'll see you, inshallah, tomorrow. And
treasure. Work.
What did you want to say, Ustaz Umayya?
Treasure.
Treasure. Treasure sound, yeah, treasures. Well, treasure would be for the thing. So the ilm is the treasure. Okay. And you would be the queens.
Oh,
Because the queen is the one that wears the treasure. So you ladies are wearing the treasures. All right. Inshallah. All right. So subhanakallahumma bihamdik nastaghfiruka wa natubu ilayk nashhadu an la ilaha illa ant. We'll see you tomorrow, inshallah, with the tafsir. We've got a lot of things to discuss. All right. And next week, remember, for those living in the US, we're talking about your Friday evening. Am I right? Yeah. And then Sunday evening. But for those that are living in Eastern areas, we're talking about Asia. That would be your Saturday and your Monday. Okay, that's when our classes are at. Okay, so those that are living in the Middle East, it would be your Saturday and your Monday. Those that are living in Asia, Saturday and Monday. Yeah, parts of Europe as well. And for those that are living in America, well, I mean, they had chosen to live that far. And guess what? I actually met with Jamal al-Din the other day. You know who that is?
told us.
Yeah, oh, I did. Okay. I guess that tells you how excited I was.
Yeah, but you didn't tell us what's going on, what she said.